Hello guys, welcome to Sip Code, and today we are looking at another cup of code. We are talking all things Jasper reports, implementation in Spring Boot. We want to see how we can use that implementation within our microservices architecture, how we can scaffold an API that will assist us in generating different reports with different file types like your PDF, your Excel, your CSV, your HTML, your Word document. So all the capabilities of Jasper Studio that can assist us in having a microservice that is responsible for our report generation or letter generation and things of that nature. So without wasting any of your time, let's get right into the demo so that you can see what we are going to achieve within this tutorial. So we have two APIs within the microservice. We have the employee detail and the employee list. So if you go to the employee detail and we basically just send that request just to see how that looks like. Let's just wait for that to come back, and we can essentially just save the response to file, and we can basically save that to our folder, whichever folder that we want. And now that that is saved, we can just go to our file system and essentially open the first file, as that's the file that we just downloaded now, employee detail. Let's just make this a bit bigger. As you can see, this is the file that we have, and if you go to the preview, you will see that we have a file of zip code details. The employee ID is 5000, name is zip code, and the email is testzipcode.com, and something like that. So if we go back to the employee list, this will give us an Excel extract of the employee list, and we will see the implementation in just a few minutes. So this is just the demo of it. So let's just download that file as well, and we can save it also in our file system. And as you can see, it will just pop up here, and boom, this is our download. And we can essentially just view that Excel. Because I do not have an Excel viewer on my machine, I'll just say I just use expose free Excel viewer, and I'll just pop the file over here. So let me just jump to that quickly. Upload file. Let's go to this guy. Let's go to this guy. And where is our Excel? Where is our Excel? This is employee list 12. I think that's it. Yeah, that should be it. Let's open that file and let's see how that looks like. So it's opening the file now, and you will see the file in Excel format over here. And now we can jump into the code base. So you can see the file zip code list report, and the list of different employees, zip code 1, 2, 3, emails, test 1, 2, 3, and basically we can have our Excel report as much as we want. So let's jump right into the actual code, and that is starting from our Spring Initializer, and that's the project. So here the project is Maven based, the language is Java, the Spring Boot version is 3.4.1. Always take the latest stable version. So you have 3.4.1 and 3.3.7. So in this instance, or the recording of the video, you have two available Spring Boot versions, so you can just take the latest stable version. So that's fine. And then you have the project metadata, which is the group, and that's com.zip code as always. And then the artifact is report microservice. The same name that we have for our artifact is the same repository name that we have within our GitHub. So please do check that out. And then the package name is the group name with the artifact name. Then the packaging is a jar, and the Java version is 17. So 17 should suffice because we are always aiming for long-time support. So please make sure you get long-time support for any of your dependencies as well. Just make sure you always get the latest stable versions with long-time support available on them. So let's jump right into the dependencies. We're not going to use a lot. We are going to make use of DevTools so that we have live reloads on code changes that we do, and the server will just bounce on the fly. And then we have the Lombok dependency, just to make use of the boilerplate code when we are creating our models or DTOs. And that will essentially give us the quick to dev in terms of the objects that we'll be using within our code base. Then we have finally the Spring Web to scaffold our REST controllers or our APIs, so that will come in very handy. There are dependencies that are within the project. I will show you those, and they are available within the pom.xml if you decide to pull the Git repository on our GitHub / Zipcode Studio and the report microservice. That's where you'll find the actual project. So if you go to the pom.xml of the project, you will see that there are other dependencies that you need to pull for your Jasper to run and be in effect. So those will be, let's just scroll down. It's essentially just the Jasper reports dependency that we'll need to add, and that's the only one that you can get from the Maven dependency website. So you just type Jasper Spring Boot Jasper reports dependency, and it will take you to the Maven direct URL, and you can basically get this particular dependency. And that's the only one that you need at this particular point. And we can jump right into the project. Let's go right into the code base. You can see how that is laid out. So as you can see that the number of dependencies that I have within the project here, I do not have a database because I'm trying to simplify it as much as possible. I don't want to add a lot of overheads in terms of configuration and setup. I just wanted to make it as easy as possible for you guys, and then you can add as much within the implementation as you want, but essentially it's here to give you the idea of how to get your microservice up and running and ready to generate reports for you. So let's jump into the code and see how that looks like. So first things first, we're going to go to the employee DTO. We're going to start with the model. We have our domain model here, which is employee DTO, and you can see that we used Lombok for a lot of the boilerplate code for a data, a builder, an all args constructor, no args constructor, the getter, the setter, and basically the JSON ignore properties. And after that, we have our object name, which is employee DTO. We only have 3 fields: ID, name, and the email. Just as we have within our report, you have the ID, the name, and the email. And that's just the high-level DTO, just to show you the idea of what we want to produce at the end, or the expected data to feed the actual report. And now that we have the DTO out the way, we have our report service. Let's go to the report service, or let's go from the controller actually. Yeah. So let's start from the controller. I think that would give us a better idea. So in our REST controller, we have our log sub4j, which is our logger, and it to basically come from Lombok. And then we have our Spring annotation address controller that will basically register this particular class as a API or an endpoint. So Spring Boot will be aware that I have a REST controller that I need to register via that annotation over there. And then we have the request mapping. So the endpoint for this particular controller will be report. So if you look at our Postman here, we have our base URL, localhost 8080. Then we have our controller endpoint, which is our report, and then we have the particular API that we want to hit or the particular method that we want to hit within the controller. And that's basically what we are talking about in the request mapping over here, which is the report that we have. And within that, we have some dependency injection happening here. We have the annotation of auto-wired, so we can pull the report service. And the report service is where our business logic sits to actually generate the reports that we expect. And we'll see this implementation just now. So let's finish these endpoints and then we will jump into the report service. So we have the first method that we have is a get mapping, and that is the employee detail. And in the employee detail, we have our get employee detail report, and which throws a generic exception. If you have your own custom exception, I recommend you do throw that so that you know what exception was thrown, and you can basically feedback the correct exception to your users or your consumers of your particular APIs. And then within the service, we have the report service where we get the actual report as a byte array, and the byte array is basically going to be generated from the export detail report. And you can see here we are sending one parameter which is of type string, and it has PDF, which means we expect the report to come back as a PDF, and those bytes will generate us a file that we can basically send back via the API as a PDF or in a PDF format. And then once we get those bytes, we basically then convert those bytes into a resource, and then we generate the name for our file, what we want the file to be called, and that's basically employee detail report. And then we have a new date that we want to generate for the file, and we basically add the file type at the end, so that when we do the save this side, when you see me do the save and I just take the generic name from the save as the generic name that comes from the service itself, that is essentially the file name that we have over here. You can be more descriptive and basically generate your own file names. Maybe let's say you can customize it to be based on the employee that you're dealing with or the employee data that you have, and just name it as much or as custom as you want it, and you can basically use it or implement that that naming convention according to your different groups. So once we have the report back from our report service, then what we do is then return that as a response entity, and we set the headers for our response, and the HTTP headers is content disposition, the attachment with the file name, and the file name is what we have at the top, and that particular file name will basically be part of the attachment that we have for our byte array resource. And then once the header is set, the content length, we say resource.get content length. So this allows us to be flexible enough because the byte array is the one that's going to tell us how big the content of what we are sending back is. And then we have the content type, which is the a media octet stream, so that it can be consumed anywhere as flexible as it can be. And we have the body, which is the resource that we have over here, and which is the actual file that we want to send back. And because we set that resource as an attachment based on the header that we have here, we can be able to download the file from the API's response directly. So if I even take, let's say this API endpoint, and I just hit that over here on Chrome, what it's going to do is just going to download the file, and you can see that that's the file name and it's the Excel of the file because this is the employee list. And if I change this to be the detail endpoint, you will see that we'll download that, and the download is going to be the PDF because the detail report, the employee detail report is a PDF, and the employee list is actually an Excel, as you can see over here. And now that we are talking the employee list endpoint, the difference between the two is on the employee list report, you would have to get the list of those employees, And once you have the list of the employees, what we do is export list report, and then in the list report, we pass in the list of the different employees, or the list of employees. And then we tell it the file type that we want. And of course, also here we can specify that we want it to be a PDF, an Excel, or HTML, or whatever format that we feel comfortable with, or what is required of us. And we get that report as a byte array as per usual. And once we have that byte array, we set that into our array resource, and basically after that we create the file name and we set our response entity as per usual. So that's the employee list report. And let's go into the report service to see how these actually create these different reports under the hood. So we're gonna go into, let's start with the export detail report from the report service. If I go to that guy, you will see that in this particular bin, we have the self4j logger just to output whatever messaging we want on the console. And then we have the annotation at service, which is the service, the report service that we're dealing with. And then we have our dependency injection over here with our auto wired, and we have our report configuration. So before we jump into this, let's go into the report configuration so we see how that looks like in a bit. So the report configuration is a configuration bin with the annotation at configuration. And what we have in here, we have one particular method that handles the file type that we want to export from Jasper itself. So we have export Jasper report bytes, and that returns a byte array of the file that we want to generate. So we pass in the Jasper print and we pass in the report type. So the report type is CSV, the Excel, the HTML, the XML, and we have the doc, which will be the Word document. And then we have the default, which is the PDF. So the default output is the PDF. And once we've set the exporter, so you will see all of these cases, we once we get in here, we basically have an output stream that we basically need to return, and that output stream will return at the end. You will see when you go to the very end. Then on the switch case, on our switch here, we switch based on the report. So whatever report type is passed in, we're gonna use that specific exporter, that Jasper exporter, and the CSV will use the CSV exporter, Excel, the Excel exporter, HTML, it's HTML exporter, and likewise with all the different file types will use their own intended exporters. And once we have the file generated, we then get the output stream for that, and the output stream is then we get the byte array from the output stream and then returned into our report generator report service. So let's go to the report service quickly, and this is where we were at. And now that we know that the report configuration takes care of which file type we're going to generate based on our report, we can basically proceed. So now that we have that, we are going into the export detail report, which takes a string of file type. And you will see why this does not take an object. That's because within this method, first things first, I get the templates. This particular template is in the source main resources. In the templates, I have two Jasper report templates, the detail report JRXML and the list report JRXML. These two templates are coming from Jasper Studio itself. So if you go to Jasper Studio, this is where you get to design all your report templates, define all the parameters that you want to pass in. So as you can see here, the detail report, we have the name of the report, then we have a title here, which is a parameter, and the title parameter is here, and we have the ID that we set also as a parameter, the name and the email as a parameter. And also in the list report, the JRXML, you will see that we have the parameter, which is the title, and then we have fields that we basically have created, and those fields are going to be populated based on the list or the collection rather that we'll be sending through to our report. So we'll see that in code in a bit. So once all of these reports have been created like this, how they look like, and all the parameters and the fields that you want to populate, we then copy these files and just paste them here on our project within our templates or static or whatever naming or folder name you want to name it. You can basically put them over there. And what we do is then just get the template URL or path to the template rather. You can also have these as base64 templates or whatever format you want them, or remotely stream these templates if you want, or if you feel like it, whatever setup that you can implement, that's as flexible as you want. And because these templates can be basically modified within Jasper Studio itself, you can work around them and set up all the configurations that you need and basically update them remotely. And then based on you having new fields or new parameters, that's only when you come to code and basically add those parameters and fields according to the requirement of that particular report. But the templates themselves, they can be remote and hosted at a remote server, which is the flexibility that we're always aiming for in a microservices architecture. We don't want to update templates and always rerun the server when we change templates only. So yeah, and that's about it with the templates. Moving on from that, we have our map, which is the parameters that we want to set into our template. These parameters are going to be set based on within this map that we have of string and object type, because we're making the object as generic as possible so that we can pass in anything that we want, and that will be that should suffice for setting your parameters. And the parameter key will be the parameter names, or the map key will be the parameter names that you have on your Jasper Studio or Jasper Report parameters. So like we have here, we put the title, the ID, the name, and the email. So this title is the parameter name that we have within our Jasper report template, and then we set the values over here on the object part of, or the value part of the map. And once all of these have been set, what we then do is get the path to the report template. Once we have that, we set the Jasper report compile, and we compile the actual template. Once that is compiled, now we have a Jasper file, just like this one here, this Jasper file like this. So once this Jasper report has been compiled, what we then do is set the data source for our Jasper report. The data source is just a new employee DTO, just like that. And once we have that new employee DTO set as an array list to our collection, so that we just set like an empty object, we then have a Jasper print that we where we populate the actual report. So this step here, we compile the report so that it's ready and it knows that we are about to generate a report. And then we have our data source, and then we fill or populate the actual report. So the compiled report is what we fill here using the Jasper fill manager .fill report, and we pass the Jasper report, the parameters that we want to set, and the data source. So the data source is coming from this collection data source, and it will basically suffice for our report populator with the parameters that we have over here. Once the Jasper print is set, or the report is populated or filled, we then export that based on the report configuration that we want, we just export Jasper bytes, and then we pass in the Jasper print and the type. And the type in this case with the detail is it's the PDF format, and it can be in Excel, it can be whatever format that we get from our string type over here. So having seen the export Jasper report bytes, the Jasper print will then be generated based on these conditions over here, and we have our report as expected. So that's essentially about it with the detailed report, and we basically can, in a nutshell, let's say we can pass in, let's say employee DTO right here. Let's just call it a DTO. And with this employee DTO, instead of us hard coding any of these values here, we can then just set this ID to DTO dot let's say get ID, and we can also do DTO dot get name. So instead of hard coding this, you can set up your method to take in the object that you want to get details of, or you can create a DTO, a report DTO, where you will populate all of these fields as required by your report. And instead of hard coding these values, you can just pass your employee details based on that particular object. So that's one thing that you can basically do. And in our instance, this is a demo, so that's why we're showcasing how you can set these up in that manner. And that's about it with the details. Let's move to the list report. So in the list report, as you can see, here I'm passing the object, as I just mentioned, now that you can also do the same here. So we pass in object data, which is in our case a list of employees, and then we have the string type. And in that particular method, we get the template as per usual. We set the data source for our list, which is a collection. So in our case, we cast our data, our object data as a collection. Once that is sorted, we then set our parameters, which is the title in this instance, and that is zip code list report. If you go to our viewer, you will see that we have oh snap, that disappeared. Okay, let me try view that again. Let's see, our where is employee? Let's open that. So on the list report, we're setting one parameter, which is the title, and that is zip code list report. And if you go to Jasper Studio, you will see that we have the title parameter over here, and that is being populated over here with the actual title, and it does display on our report right here. And now we have our parameters and our list data source. Then we basically compile our report. Once the report is compiled, we then fill our report with our compiled Jasper report and the parameters and the data source. And the data source in our instance is the collection or the list of employees that we just passed into that JR bin collection. Once that is set up, we then go to our report configuration and export the report bytes based on our type. In our instance, it's the XML. It's the Excel rather, and that's basically going to use the Excel exporter to generate our report. And once that report is ready, it is returned back into our controller right here. So if you go to the report controller, then we get our report as expected over here with the list of these employees, and we basically then export that and return it to the API as we want. So if I say, let's change all of these to like 7, 7, 7, and let's save this, and let's go back to our configuration. Let's see, this is fine. and we can just fix, let's just fix the report detail, the export detail report, so it doesn't take that object because we've hard-coded everything there. So now everything's fine. So we'll just see what this will look like, and we go to our postman. We want to run the employee list. So employee list, let's run that API and see what we get back. And it's running. Now we're just gonna save the response to file, and we are going to save this as that. That's fine with the default name, and we go to our Excel viewer. Let's just click on the Excel viewer over there, and let's look for our export 28. That is right now. Yes, that's the one. That's the one. Right. Let's see what the employee IDs look like, because we only changed the employee IDs. Now you can see employee ID 701, 702, 703, and that is what we just did over here. And you can remove this implementation, add database, and basically start interacting with your report, and allow it to be dynamic and flexible based on a database feedback, or calling an API to get the data that will then generate the actual report for you. So this means the microservice is responsible for generating the letter. It can call another microservice to get the data for the report, and then once you have the data, you can then pass the data into your report generator, and it will basically generate the report for you and save it wherever it needs to save it. You can add the implementation to work with an FTP, and as you generate these reports, or as you generate these files, you post or publish them or push them into an FTP, or communicate them to an email, wherever you need to send them to. That is one implementation that you can add, so that this microservice is fully functional within your space. And I hope this came in very handy. Wanted to keep it short and sweet, and that's basically about it. Until next time, for now, cheers.